Hey everybody, I have a really interesting video for you today, and this is going to be great for guys and you ladies out there. It's primarily in response to a frequent question that I've been getting recently from guys who are feeling lack of confidence in their walking because either they feel that they have too much hip swiveling going on or they're being told that they have too much hip swiveling going on. And I'm going to address that, but I'm also going to address more of the overarching idea of how we can walk with more confidence and how we can express how we feel inside. Because other people are trying to express a more feminine side of themselves when they walk, and they're not being able to do that in a way that makes them feel confident. So I'm going to share with you today what is causing some hip swivel for both men and women, what you can do to accentuate that or remedy that, and also what really creates a more feminine walking style for you ladies out there who think your walking style might be a little bit too masculine for what you're trying to express. And it's going to help you to really embody that feminine walking style that you're looking for. And like I said, for guys to get that more masculine walking style and take out some of the hip swivel that you have. I'm also going to combat a little bit of misperception people have about what's causing hip sway and hip swivel when people are walking, because when models are walking on a runway, it really isn't a natural sort of hip sway or swivel that you would be trying to emulate if you wanted to do a more feminine walking style. So I'm going to kind of address all of this in the video, and I think it's going to help a lot of you. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Todd Martin, creator of the Walking Code. I try to help people on this channel figure out how to use their core to move more fluidly, walk with more confidence, and walk with lower impact on their joints. If you want to support the channel and get this information out to more people, go ahead and smash that like button right now. It's the best way you can support the channel, and it's free. You can also support the channel by picking up some Walking Code merch like this Walking is Man's Best Medicine shirt. You'll see this on the merch bar below the video. And you can also pick up your copy of the Walking Code book or sign up for the Walking Code online course. All the links for this stuff is going to be in the description section. So let's go ahead and get started. There are four primary factors in anybody's walk that are going to affect whether that walk appears more masculine or more feminine. And there's also some health implications to how this is working. So those are going to be number one, hip sway, number two, hip swivel, number three, foot positioning, and number four, how far the legs are apart as they pass one another. I'm going to go ahead and define this more specifically so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So for hip swivel, what we're talking about is rotation of the hips in this manner, rotating in the horizontal plane parallel to the ground. So if I'm walking with hip swivel, you're going to see this sort of action going on. So this is a pronounced hip swivel. Now, hip sway is something different. Hip sway is going to be motion of the hips in this coronal plane or frontal plane here. So one hip is going to rise on the side as the other drops. So that is hip sway. Hip sway is definitely something that accentuates somebody with larger hips. And so even if you have smaller hips, by exaggerating that hip sway, it may create a more feminine appearance. And that's probably what most people are thinking about when they think about a more female walking style, because it's what you'll see models doing on the catwalk. But there's a little bit of a misperception about that, and I'm going to explain that as we go forward. The next thing we're going to be looking at is the position of our feet. When people are walking with their feet facing forward, it's going to have a neutral appearance, neither masculine or feminine. But if people walk with their feet turned out in this manner, like the duck foot walk, it's going to have a very particularly non-feminine look. Not that it's masculine, but it's not feminine. And so that's the duck foot walk like this. A lot of people, men and women, walk with duck feet, and it is definitely not a feminine way to walk. It's not a good way for either men or women to walk, but it certainly is going to not be what you're looking for if you're going to try to walk with a more feminine appearance. The final thing I'm going to talk about is how wide the spacing is between the legs when you are walking and the legs are passing one another. The wider apart the legs are, the less feminine that's going to appear. The more closely the legs and feet pass each other, the more feminine that is going to appear. So passing close by, more feminine appearing. That's close by. And more wide apart is obviously going to be less feminine appearing. So we're going to be looking at all 4 of those elements of gait in this video so you can figure out how you can best approximate the style of walking that you're looking for, and also understand the health implications of each of those styles, because it's really important above all that we walk in a healthy manner. The first thing I'm going to do is demonstrate a neutral walk. This is neither feminine nor masculine, and it's basically the style of walking that I teach in all of my videos. You're going to notice no excessive hip sway or hip swivel. The hips are going to rotate just enough to get the swing leg to move forward. You'll also notice as I do this from the side view that the arm is going to move forward on the side opposite the swing leg, and it's going to rise just to about the height of the swing of the leg, and it's going to drop down back to the side of the body, not pulling back behind the body. From the back view, you'll also notice that the palms are facing the side of the thighs, not facing backward, as you'll see in some other forms of walking that I'm going to demonstrate during this video. Now I'm going to demonstrate the exaggerated hip swivel, that horizontal rotation, and I'm going to get into the mechanics of that before I move on to the others. I'm going to do that because the question that I've been getting on YouTube is frequently from guys who are trying to figure out why they have this excessive hip swivel, and they're hoping that they can get rid of it. So I'm going to demonstrate that hip swivel. You're going to best see that from the forward and back view. So I'm going to walk away from the camera and then back towards the camera, doing the exaggerated hip swivel. In addition to the exaggerated hip swivel you see here, you're also going to notice the arm swing variation. Instead of going forward and back in a smooth manner, the arms are swinging at an angle. The angle can vary depending on the type of hip swivel that's done. There are different variations depending on whether the feet are facing forward or when people are doing this with duck feet. But generally speaking, you're going to see a more angular arm movement, and it's going to move back behind the body more so than when people are walking with a normal arm swing. All right, so now that we have seen the difference between the hip swivel and the neutral walking style, I'm going to break down some of the mechanics. And I would have everybody pay close attention to this because I'm going to describe the normal mechanics, which everybody should be shooting for a healthy walk, and then contrast that with what's going on with the hip swivel. When we power the step using our hips, we begin from the point the heel hits the ground, powering a normal step forward on level ground by flexing the rear leg hip, meaning we're pulling the rear leg forward as if we're trying to lift it off the ground. If I do the whole motion, it's going to end up like that. So you'll notice I don't finish a normal swing through. My body stops moving after my knee gets over my ankle. I'm going to do it a couple times so you can see the motion in fluidity. Pulling, flexing from the rear leg hip, as I move forward, and that would be the end of the motion. Really, that motion ends when the toe is just about off the ground. That is the equilibrium point. I can try and lift the foot further, but that's not a stable balancing position. We need to do something different to get the step to continue progressing forward. And when we're walking normally, what that something is going to be is switching the power from the swing leg hip pulling forward now to the standing leg hip pulling forward. It's going to pull the body forward like this, and in conjunction with the motion of our lower abs keeping the pelvis level is going to pull the body forward through the swing through, so then we can start over placing the heel down. That's a normal step. I'll just take a few steps here from the side view. So it's very neutral. There's no swivel, there's no sway. Now, what happens when we're getting a hip swivel? What's creating this action here, whether it's fast or whether it's slow? The difference is going to be in the power. So instead of pulling forward from the rear hip, we are going to be pushing back. So I'm using the glutes to push the leg back against the ground between the time the heel hits the ground and the flat of the foot hits the ground. So I'm pushing back against the ground here. And again, I can't swing forward, and it's a little bit more obvious here because my leg is moving backward, so I have to do something different for my leg to start moving forward. Now, I told you that when we flex the hip to get to this position, we can't swing through by continuing to flex and have the body go forward. We're going to freeze in this position. But if I have powered this motion here by extending the hip, I can now flex the hip and it allows me to move forward. From the front view, when I'm walking normally without hip swivel or sway, I'm placing the heel, shifting forward, and pulling through. And I just continue that process. And there's a relatively even movement of the pelvis throughout the whole motion. And so you don't see any exaggerated back and forth of the hip relative to the body. What you'll also notice is that the arm swing is going to parallel almost exactly the leg swing. So as my left leg goes forward, my right arm is going to go forward exactly as much as the left leg. And then the arm is going to drop back to the side of the body, and then the left arm is going to swing forward to the same height, degree, and speed as the right leg. You're not going to see the arm pulling back briskly behind the body. So that's a normal non-swiveling gait. When we are walking with excessive hip swivel, or I won't say excessive hip swivel, just walking with hip swivel for better or for worse, what's happening is we are pushing off the ground behind. That's creating a twist in the pelvis that can't complete itself because the leg is still on the ground. I'm pushing the pelvis around, but not letting it go until I release by flexing the swing leg hip. That allows the swing leg to pull through, and you're going to get a kind of rapid swivel of the hip as soon as it releases, as the rear leg hip goes from extension to flexion. You're going to get that exaggerated swivel. One final quick point on a related subject, which you might find interesting, is power walking is going to have that same hip extension from the back leg hip. I'm talking about power walking where people are walking with their elbows flexed like this. But instead of then powering the swing through by throwing the swing leg forward, they're going to do just like I described for normal walking, is powering with the standing leg hip to take the final part of the step. When we do the motion in that way, hip extension on the right and then hip flexion on the left, it forces the elbow into this flexed position. So for those of you who are walking like this, the arm position is not just because you decide you want to bend your elbows and drive your walk with that. The arm position is being created by the hip power. And this is what that looks like. Before I get started on the next section, I want to encourage you all to stick around for this whole video because I know it's going to end up being a little bit long because I'm covering quite a few topics here, but they're all interrelated, and the ideas I'm talking about right now are going to build upon each other as I go forward and really going to help you understand the next part of this movement that I'm talking about, and it's going to help you to improve your walking style regardless of what your issue may be. It's also going to help address people who are duckfoot walking, and that is by far the most common problem people are having when they walk. So let's go ahead now and move forward, and we're going to talk about the hip sway. So as I described before, hip sway is going to be this motion of the hips in the coronal plane, and that sort of hip sway can have a very feminine appearance. But it's very different how we do this if we're trying to walk in a natural feminine walking style compared to how you will see models doing this on the runway. So when models are walking on the runway, you're going to see the hip sway up on the side of the swing leg in this fashion. And you're going to get a bit of a stomping effect when women walk in this manner. The standing leg hip, you're going to see it suck in as the swing leg hip pops up before placing the heel down in a rather abrupt fashion, and then we move again to the standing leg hip moving in and the swing leg hip popping up. That is a model style walking with hip sway, but I would tell you it is not the feminine way of walking. I'm going to show my wife walking here, and you're going to see a natural sort of female walking style where you're not going to see an exaggerated hip sway or hip swivel, and you're going to see the legs passing more closely by one another, which gives it a more feminine walk. Now, my wife is not exaggerating here, so you're not going to see a lot of hip swivel or sway going on, but you're going to notice the walking style is going to be more feminine appearing, probably mostly because you're seeing the feet pass nicely by each other and sometimes almost in line with one another. All right, we're on the home stretch here. I'm going to briefly talk about foot positioning. As I mentioned before, in a feminine or neutral walking style, the feet should be facing forward. And in fact, this is just the healthy way to walk. And so many people these days are walking with their feet either slightly or more severely turned out. And that actually is a problem for the joints. And the cause is similar to the issue with the hip swivel, and it's hip power. When people are walking with their feet turned out, they're powering with the swing leg hip instead of the standing leg hip. And as I mentioned before, if you try to do that with your feet facing forward and you're not pushing off, you're not going to be able to complete the swing through. But if I turn my feet out at an angle, now what you'll notice is you can power by swinging the swing leg hip through, flexing it, and it's going to bring it through in this fashion. And that is going to allow you to walk without using the standing leg hip to power, but it's going to keep your feet turned out. And That isn't healthy for the structure of your legs. It also is going to affect your hand position because it's going to cause your palms to turn back instead of your palms being facing the side of your thighs. So this is a bad style of movement if you're trying to look graceful and fluid, and it's also not good for your joints. If you're trying to fix it, it's the same fix as what I talked about for the hip swivel, and that is learning how to power from the standing leg hip as you swing through. That is going to keep your feet in a straight line. I'll give you a simple exercise you can do as an example. If you're walking duck-footed, before you take that swing through, instead of throwing this leg forward, power from this leg hip, and it's going to pull you in line with that foot. It's that simple. So if you follow the principles in this video, regardless of what the walking issue you may have, I think you're going to be able to get the style of movement that you're looking for, and you're also going to be able to do it in a healthy manner. And that's really the most important thing for us, as well as being able to move confidently. I will see you in the next video. Have a great day.